This one is the title poem of the book, and it's called The Trouble with Creation. Better put my glasses on. In the draughty halls of heaven, God sits slumped upon his throne. The shadows lengthen endlessly, and he's so alone. He knows the problem with creation. He's tried it many times before. First, you pick a fine location, a gentle universe to play in. He smiles at the cards, they dance and turn from him. The dice are all cast, spin chances around him. Creation abounds, and his loneliness fades in the lights and the sounds that his small spell has made. But it's always the same. In the heat of the game, a clatter of voices grow and inflame. Why us, God? Why such pain? The old heated questions, the shouts and rejections. Why us, Lord? Why this pain? Sudden, the shadows fall, sudden dismay, as his greatest creation is turning away. With a touch of his finger, he puts out the flame, and the cold halls of heaven are lonely again.
I'm going to start with a poem that Dad wrote in memory of my granddad, our granddad, his father, and it's called In Memory of My Father. He actually read this at Granddad's funeral. In memory of my father. A quiet man in a quiet suit, more John Wayne than Errol Flynn, honest as a weather vane, more the soft Mayo rain than the cold wind. Now, this second poem I'm going to read is actually the poem that I wrote in response to, I suppose, Dad dying maybe, and the whole process of a funeral. And it's called Outside the Church. We shuffled a refrain outside that church and avoided one another's gaze, wet eyes glistening, bleared with the sadness and drink. Uncles, brothers, set to shoulder your weight. Nearly the same height, relative to one another. We took the casket with a tensed shudder, a dark teak casket that shrouded your frame. Sunday's best for church, a first time for everything. Relative unknown to Christ, but that way set. That wet dank day you pressed, indented my shoulder, much heavier than when in some sadness you would grasp me there, tell me my sadness should be done with. For your hand, a casket. It did not work. Shoulder to shoulder we marched in. Finally got us to church, your death, with stinking hangovers, your wet, dishevelled brood, fitting. We relatives relate differently now. Relative to back God knows when, addressed this sadness in a pub first, where with Guinness we wet our whistles, practice for your teak casket by propping up the oak bar. Like at church, we confess sins, but left singing, shoulder propped, slumped, swaying, leaning on broad shoulders, smiling-eyed. I found in each relative our memories distilled, a whiskied church, a rowdy chapel, where to spite sadness, we invoke your spirit, not your casket between us, to be swallowed by the wet, clayed turf, but something much lighter, in wet months and dry, which shows how we will shoulder your past's imprint, deeper than that casket's bruising, tapestry-tattooed relatives who echo your life with a drink. Sadness combines well with cheer and bugger church. When the casket lowered outside that church, the sun broke through wet sky, and the shoulders of each relative, despite sadness, rose.